Hi, my friends. I'm going to share with you one of the biggest financial blunders I've ever seen in my nearly 25 years as a professional financial advisor. This is part and parcel of what the madness of crowds, FOMO, fear of missing out, and greed lead to. And I'll never forget this. So I shared with you 2004, I started with a firm called Legg Mason in their financial advisory training program, essentially just to be a stockbroker. They didn't care how you raise money. They just wanted you to bring assets so you could sell people stuff, be it fees or commissions. And if you did that well, you made a lot of money. If you didn't do that well, you're gonna be out in your tush in about 3 years. I think we had a 3-year training program where you went off salary and just straight commissions. Anyway, so I had a small office. I think we only had 4 or 5 guys in there. And my boss, who brought me over, a real nice guy, he raised his business in the old way, which is cold calling and seminars. And that worked for me for the most part. I was raising money, but then I ran to the buzzsaw of the Great Recession. And so thankfully, USA threw me a lifeline and I was rescued. But I'll never forget, a client of another person in the branch called in, and that guy or lady who was the account advisor, the financial advisor, was out. It must have been like a Friday afternoon or something like that, because the office was dead. A lot of these people would leave early, come in late, which is weird because a lot of them weren't making that much money. You'd think they'd be working harder. My branch manager, on the other hand, he did all that in the beginning of his first 10, 15 years of his career. He burned the midnight oil, making calls, seeing people and doing that. So he was reaping the rewards of his hard work from previous years. Other folks in the office weren't making squat, and they just didn't have the motive. I don't know, it was weird, but whatever. So I was the last guy in there when this lady called in. Where'd she come in? I can't remember. But she wanted to take a distribution. She was like 50 years old. Wanted to take a distribution of like $250,000 or something like that in order to buy this piece of property in Smith Mountain Lake. Now, Smith Mountain Lake was being developed outside Charlottesville for kind of up-to-do baby boomers who are retiring or going to have second houses. In fact, my boss had a place there at Smith Mountain Lake, and he went there a lot. So he didn't buy it for speculation. He bought it to enjoy it. I think he went down there basically every weekend. And I remember this lady talked to her because she has to go through an advisor to get access to the money to say, hey, look, you realize the tax consequence, what are you trying to sell, and blah, blah, blah. Because someone's got to make the trade. She couldn't do it for herself back then. And so she's a nice lady. I was talking to her. I said, look, you recognize this thing's going to be taxed. And I think she was under 59.5. So you're going to pay 10% taxes or penalty plus, income tax on that $200,000 or $250,000, whatever it was. So we're just saying she's going to lose, at least 40% of the money to taxes. So, $250, I think it's what we ended up doing was like roughly $250 because I think she needed to net like $160 or something like that. The numbers are I don't remember, but something like that. She had to take a big amount out in order to net that certain amount of money to be able to buy the speculative land in Smith Mountain Lake. And I'll never forget saying, okay. And her whole thing, I'll never forget this. She goes, well, it's only going to go up in value. The way the market has been appreciating, I'll be able to reclaim all the taxes shortly. And then I said, okay, that's great, whatever. And then she goes, then I'm going to sell it once I get my profit back and do another one. I can make more doing this than I can in the markets and not have to pay this guy a fee. And I said, okay. And I just remember saying there thinking, it's your money. I wasn't my client. I was like, do whatever the hell you want, but I just remember thinking that, like, this seems absurd to me. But again, it's her money. Now, that was in 2005, and probably the latter part of 2005. I just kind of remember it's somewhat chilly outside at that point. I don't remember the whole story, but that's a lot of money coming from her IRA, paying tax and a penalty on to invest in a speculative piece of land in a vacation destination. That's the thing. You never want to really speculate in vacation areas because those are the first things that people won't buy, or they'll sell at a loss just to get out from under them. I mean, they're never going to sell at a loss their primary occupancy unless, if they can avoid it, but they will on a vacation home. That's why banks are very cautious for loaning you a typical mortgage when it comes to buying a second home or investment property, because that's the first thing you're going to liquidate. You liquidate that before you liquidate your vehicle. Anyway, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to those properties at Smith Mountain Lake. No idea. But I'm listening to podcasts now. An Austrian economist, I'm not sure where he's out of, maybe Auburn. He calls it the skyscraper curse. And he used that as an example of, he was actually talking about the Dubai debt crisis. And I hadn't heard anyone talk about that in a long, long time. So it was interesting. Listening to his book on, Audible. And he talked about that, anytime there's a skyscraper, that's going to be the largest, run for the hills. But he was talking about when he was at Auburn University, he had given a talk, I think it was to the National Association of Home Builders, or maybe the NAR, National Association of Realtors down there, or the local group, about how he thought the markets were for luxury condos, what they call game day condos, so people could buy a condo, have a place to stay during Auburn University football games, without having to rent it out as well to kids. And he was talking about that, and he said this market is doomed because there's just not enough cash flow to afford these, blah, blah, blah. And I remember, and he was saying that the professionals in the industry were very, very mad at him because they were saying, as was the National Association of Realtors economists, that the market was only going to go up. All fake news. They had no clue. It's propaganda, unfortunately. And if you listen to those people like this lady assuredly did, you lost your shirt. Now, I don't blame the NAR for that. I blame the people who are FOMO, fear of missing out, who had greed and the madness of crowds, saying, I got to get in there for some other guy gets in there so I can make money. That's your fault, man. I'm sorry to say, it's your fault. And I don't know what happened to this lady. It wasn't my client, like I said. I was just there to essentially sell the shares that she had. I don't even know what she had. I can't remember. I just had to process the distribution. And I'm sure she took it on the chin. I bet she never recouped, actually. We also had a place in Harrisonburg. They're doing all these, they kind of come back now, but these urban areas, multi-living places. We got businesses, boutique shops, artisan places, and you have townhomes, luxury townhomes, and houses around. They did that in Harrisonburg as well. I think they want to say like Town and Lake Estates or something like that. And I know people who invest in those things in Harrisonburg, and that died on the vine. I actually kind of chuckle at that because that was a wave of the future, the smart growth. We don't want people living in the suburbs. We want them living in these smart communities where they don't have to drive, and it sounds good. In fact, they're coming up here in Alpharetta. We got a couple. They're freaking going, those condos are going for like $400,000 and $500,000. Hell, my man Fritz was showing me condos in Blue Ridge going for $400,000 in downtown. I was like, I just don't get that, man. But whatever, spend your money any way you want, but I don't see how you're going to find a buying audience for a $200,000, a $400,000 condo in quote unquote downtown Blue Ridge. I just don't see that. Unless I guess you're doing the Airbnb thing, I guess, but that just seems like a huge risk to me. Anyway, be careful. Be careful of falling for the FOMO, fear of missing out. Madness of crowds. There's all kinds of books on that. I think his name's Charles Mackay from the 1700s, maybe 1800s, had written a book on the the Dutch tulip crisis, pale Indian, East Indian trading company, whatnot. People buying shares, speculating. Read up on that. I think you'll find it very interesting. Just don't fall for it. Now, at the end of the day, how do you know? Just common sense, man. To take a 35 to 40% hit in order to buy a speculative piece of land, that just doesn't make sense to me. And I mean, you gotta think, what's the upside? Just say, she invests 160,000 bucks and gets a, 20% rate of return. That's a 32,000. Yeah, it's 32,000 rate of return. A $32,000 she gets on a 20% rate of return. But it cost her 60,000 bucks. Now, she would say, certainly, well, those prices are doubling every couple of years. And you're like, inherently, that cannot continue. That's, again, the greatest fool theory. She was the greatest fool. The developer loved it. The realtor loved it. She got stuck holding the wet bag because of her greed. That's one of the biggest, if not the biggest blunder I've ever seen in my career. All right, we'll see you.